Have you ever heard of the emperor who saved an entire Roman army but had to sign one of the most humiliating treaties in Roman history to do it? This is the story of Jovian, a man whose brief, chaotic reign changed the course of the empire forever, even though he was only in power for 8 months. His story is a classic tale of crisis, survival, and the heavy price of leadership. Our story begins in the year 363 AD, in the heart of the Persian Empire. The Roman Emperor Julian, known to history as the apostate for his attempts to revive paganism, had led his massive army deep into enemy territory. His goal was to crush the Sassanid Persians, Rome's greatest rival. But the campaign was a disaster. The Romans were overextended, their supply lines were cut, and they were constantly harassed by Persian forces. Then, in a skirmish, Julian was struck by a spear and died. Imagine the scene. The Roman army, leaderless, starving, and surrounded by a hostile enemy hundreds of miles from home. It was a recipe for complete annihilation. The generals gathered in a state of panic. They needed a new emperor, and they needed one now. Their first choice was a man named Seleucus, but he wisely turned down the job, knowing it was a poisoned chalice. So they turned to their second choice, a high-ranking officer named Jovian. Jovian was a Christian and the commander of the imperial bodyguards. He was known for being a capable soldier, but he wasn't a brilliant strategist or a political heavyweight. He was chosen simply because he was there and someone had to take charge. In the middle of the desert, surrounded by enemies, Jovian was hailed as the new emperor of Rome. His first and only task was survival. He had to get his men out of Persia alive. The situation was desperate. The army was on the verge of starvation and collapse. The Persian king, Shapur II, knew he had the Romans exactly where he wanted them. He didn't need to fight a decisive battle, he could just wait for them to starve. Jovian knew his options were grim. He could try to fight his way out, which would likely result in the slaughter of his entire army, or he could negotiate. He chose to negotiate. Shapur II drove a hard bargain. He demanded a peace treaty that would be incredibly painful for Rome. To save his army, Jovian had to agree to give up vast territories in Mesopotamia and Armenia that Rome had controlled for decades. This included the vital fortress city of Nisibis, a key defensive bastion on the eastern frontier. The citizens of Nisibis were so loyal to Rome that they begged Jovian to let them defend the city themselves. But the terms of the treaty were clear. The city had to be handed over, and its population evacuated. This treaty was seen as a national disgrace. For an empire that prided itself on military strength and conquest, surrendering territory without a fight was almost unthinkable. Many Romans were furious, viewing Jovian as a coward who had tarnished the empire's honor. But what choice did he have? He saved the lives of tens of thousands of Roman soldiers who would have otherwise perished in the desert. It was a classic case of choosing survival over pride, a decision that would haunt his legacy forever. He saved the army, but at what felt like the cost of Rome's soul. As Jovian led his battered but living army back towards Roman lands, his next major act was to completely reverse the religious policies of his predecessor. Julian the Apostate had tried to sideline Christianity and bring back the old pagan gods. He had removed Christians from positions of power, closed churches, and promoted pagan philosophy. Jovian, a devout Christian himself, immediately undid all of it. One of his first decrees was to restore Christianity as the favored religion of the state. He returned confiscated church property, brought back state funding for the clergy, and restored the Chi-Rho symbol to the army's banners. This was a pivotal moment. Julian's pagan revival had threatened to undo decades of Christian growth, but Jovian's actions slammed that door shut for good. He effectively secured Christianity's dominant place within the Roman Empire, a legacy that would far outlast his own short life. Think about it. If Julian had been succeeded by another pagan, the religious landscape of the Western world might look very different today. Jovian's brief reign was the critical firewall that prevented that from happening. After securing the peace and the faith, Jovian began the long journey back to Constantinople, the capital, to consolidate his rule. But he would never make it. His reign, which began in crisis, would end in mystery. After just 8 months on the throne, in February of 364 AD, Jovian was found dead in his bed in a small town in Bithynia, a region in modern-day Turkey. The circumstances of his death are still debated by historians. The official account was that he died from accidental carbon monoxide poisoning, caused by a charcoal brazier used to heat his room on a cold winter night. It's a plausible explanation, as such accidents were not uncommon. Others whispered of a more sinister cause. Had he been assassinated? Perhaps by disgruntled officers who were angry about the humiliating peace treaty with Persia. Or maybe he simply had a stroke or a heart attack. Some even suggested he died from indigestion after a particularly large meal, or from inhaling the fumes of freshly applied paint in his room. We'll likely never know the truth, but his sudden death threw the Roman Empire back into chaos. They had just lost one emperor in battle, and now his successor was dead after only a few months. The stability of the empire was once again on a knife's edge. The army had to choose another emperor, which led to the selection of two brothers, Valentinian and Valens, who decided to split the empire into western and eastern halves to make it more manageable. This division would become more and more permanent over the next century. So how should we remember Jovian? Was he a coward who gave away the empire, or a pragmatist who made an impossible choice to save his men? The answer is probably somewhere in between. He inherited an unwinnable situation created by Julian's reckless ambition. His decision to sign the peace treaty was humiliating, yes, but it was also a rational one that preserved the core of the Roman army in the east. Without that army, the entire eastern frontier would have collapsed. Jovian. Story is a powerful reminder that history isn't always about glorious victories and heroic last stands. Sometimes it's about messy compromises, difficult choices, and leaders who are forced to sacrifice honor for survival. His 8-month reign was a whirlwind of disaster, diplomacy, and religious reversal. He saved an army, secured a faith, and then vanished from the stage as quickly as he had appeared, leaving a legacy that was both shameful and essential to the future of Rome. He's the emperor who reminds us that sometimes the most important victory is just living to fight another day. Thanks for watching. If you found this dive into a lesser-known chapter of Roman history interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the ancient world. Let me know in the comments what you think of Jovian's decision. Was he a hero or a failure? See you next time.